Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of How to Scale an Agency. I'm on with the Corey Quinn, who owns Corey Quinn Inc. He's helped Scorpion, which a lot of you guys might actually know about them. They're a pretty awesome agency that's grown considerably over the last 5 years, I think, 10 years maybe, but they've
Yep.
been around for a while. I've heard about them. I've actually lost a few clients to them before in the past, so they're pretty good. And they're definitely taking the world by storm. So Corey helped build that business up and
Yep.
is now helping B2B SaaS companies and agencies scale and grow and do better. So I'm really
Mhm.
excited to have you on the show, Corey. Got a lot of good questions for you and excited to hear your stories. Thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, Lucas. Super excited to be here.
So Corey, let's start from square one. What did you do at Scorpion that you
Sure.
feel gives you the knowledge necessary to train people on how to do the same thing for their agencies or their
Sh-
businesses?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think I'll give you a little bit of background on my time at Scorpion, what we accomplished, and then we could kind of talk about how I can help other folks from that experience. So, back in 2015, I was hired as Scorpion's very first CMO, and
Mm,
at the time, the agency was doing about $20 million in revenue. It's a founder-led business. And the founder, to that point, had mostly hired a lot of his friends and high school buddies to help kind of build this business organically from scratch. And they were very, very successful, getting to 20 million. But he had the founder really had a deep desire to grow, to be a much bigger company. So he started looking outside the company to folks who had some experience in growth and marketing and sales. And so I was recruited from the company I was at to come help Rustin, the CEO and founder,
yeah.
to grow the business. And when I landed there, it was I was a marketing team of one, so
Mm.
I was the only person in corporate marketing, but
Really, at
uh,
20 million, they didn't have a marketing really department?
no, they
Wow.
didn't. It was basically the CEO, every once in a while, you know, hiring an agency to do some brochures and just sending it out to some list they bought
Wow.
off of Zoom Info type of thing.
Yeah.
But the way they got to 20 million was really, really smart. What they did is they had a concentration of businesses in the law firm personal injury space, so criminal
Right.
defense, but personal injury, those type of attorneys, as well as hospitals of all things. And
Yeah.
the way that the service that they primarily provided when they started was websites, and they would build websites that were SEO optimized. And back in the day, attorneys didn't. This was about the time when I joined, when attorneys were still getting comfortable with having a website and needing a website for their presence, and people beginning to use places like Google to find an attorney. Um, and so what would happen is, because Scorpion was early, they ended up amassing a lot of attorney clients. Every client got a website, and it was SEO optimized. And at the bottom of every website was a logo, a Scorpion logo, with a link back to Scorpion. And the way that attorneys shop, I learned, is that if you were not a Scorpion customer, you just and you wanted to get more SEO or more leads from your website, you would go to Google and you'd search for personal injury attorney in my area, and then of course a Scorpion website would come up, and so that attorney would click and find the Scorpion website and call us. And so the business was really
Right.
built tremendously on a lot of
Mm.
inbound marketing, or inbound leads that were finding the websites and coming inbound. And so um, what we realized very quickly was that in order to scale up the business from 20
Right.
million to 150 million, which is what I left at the end of last year, about 6 years later, we grew it to 150 million. So what we needed to do to get that kind of scale is that we needed to um, formalize the inbound process, do a lot more things when it came to inbound marketing for Scorpion, but then also introduce a whole new discipline to the team, which was outbound sales and marketing. And
Right.
yeah, right. And so there's a lot of work that we did there that helped
Yeah.
us to really grow the company.
So I have a theory that I'm working on, and I would be curious to hear what your thoughts are on it. I just did a podcast episode about it, and maybe before or after this episode, depending on when this airs. but I'm curious how you think about lead gen and lead magnets,
Mhm.
because I feel like I've been playing the wrong game for 4 years. And I feel like recently I feel as if, and it's not like I'm some genius. It's a product, it's a process I think anybody can replicate, honestly,
Mhm.
without even spending any money. It's just like a very simple one, which is I'm pretty confident I could probably get 100 meetings booked on any person's calendar
Mhm.
in less than 30 days just by making the lead magnet so freaking good that like everybody says yes. So
Mhm.
when I was doing outbound, which is how I got started, we didn't get started with inbound, we got started with outbound.
Mhm.
I was just banging my head against the wall, and I would constantly go and say, hey, I'm going to go call 100 people and maybe two of them will say yes. But
Yeah.
then recently, what started to happen in the last like 9 months, I realized that if I gave someone something that was not a sales pitch and I could just get them on the phone, and then at the end of the calendar invite, I said, do you have like 10 minutes to let me tell you kind of how we do things? And if you're interested, that could turn into a sales call, and I would get 80 people out of 100 to say yes. And then
Mhm.
of those 50 meetings, just from 100 or 40 meetings, right? And that's actually what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, did you guys ever try any lead magnet strategies where instead of just like doing the traditional, hey, my name is Bob, I'm from Scorpion, we can do SEO for your area. Did you do anything
Mhm.
else that got more people to say yes? Because I feel like that's the biggest problem I see with agencies is they just do stuff that people constantly say no to, and they wonder why they're
Yeah.
being yelled at on the phone, why no one wants to talk to them, why they're saying like, get me off your call list, like all this stuff, you know? Is that something that you've kind of been able to get around, or what has been
Yeah.
like for you?
So I'll answer that in two different ways. So speaking specifically to content, which is, lead magnet in my mind is a type of content.
Right.
And I'll also speak to something I call a USI, which I'll explain here in a minute. But when it comes to content, the thing that worked for us, we were very intentional about becoming the guide. If you follow sort of the story brand framework that
Right.
Donald Miller puts out, there's a metaphor of the buyer is the hero on their own hero's journey, using the sort of the story metaphor, and that
Yeah.
the service provider, the agency, is the guide. And so when it comes to internet marketing, Scorpion sold websites and PPC and SEO and all these things, there's a lot of um, myths and confusion. And attorneys, they went to school to become an attorney. They're expert at being provocative in the courtroom, not and managing SEO and managing the
Right.
web. And in many cases, they felt that uh, based on my experience, many of them feel like a fish out of water when it comes to the internet, especially in the early
Right.
days. And so the way that we went to market with our content was really about being a guide and helping them to meet them where they're at with regard to their hopes, their fears, their confusions, and helping to dispel those. And so with that framework, we are the guide. We would put together gated ebooks and whatnot as a way to begin to get signals from the market of people who are interested in buying or trying to diagnose their
Right.
problem and so on and so forth. So we took that approach when it came to content.
Yeah. So did you ever have one that you felt was like so good that it just worked all the time? I mean, because I found one recently, which I don't know if it's just because it's a recent phenomenon and maybe it just didn't exist in the past, or if there's other similar lead magnets that also worked in the past that I'm not aware of. But the whole podcast thing, man, has been a game changer because
Mm,
I could go into any community, and this isn't even me trying to sell people on this because I don't actually sell the process of getting people on podcasts. I sell everything else, but I don't sell this. So like anyone could just go replicate this. It's not like it's hard. It's just literally everyone wants exposure, everyone wants to
yeah,
be put in front of the people. So what I did to get launched in the community to get all my first members is I would just invite them all on the pod.
yep,
Everyone would say yes.
yes,
And then like again, 80% of people would say they wanted to know more about my service. And then
100%,
sometimes I didn't even need to sell them because they would just mention it. Even if they didn't check the box, they'd be like, so what do you guys do? And then I would just give them the pitch. So what I've realized is that a lot of it is just about getting the conversation to happen. And if the conversation is happening, then people will convert from there naturally, but they'll convert at a
for
much
sure,
higher rate because a lot of this is relationship driven. It's like,
100%.
so like, did you ever have anything that was just, this is insane, like this is just printing money, like how are you doing this right now?
So I want to tell you about USIs in a second because it keeps coming up. But we did have a podcast. We actually did 3 podcasts while I was at Scorpion, and then 3 actual YouTube shows. But one of the podcasts is still running. It's called The Sharpest Tool, and it's specifically for home service businesses.
Mm.
And the thing that we would do with the Sharpest Tool is very similar to what you just shared, which is if we had a white whale client that or
Yeah.
a prospect that we wanted to close, we would invite them into our Scorpion studios and, put them on a jet and come out there and give them the song and dance. And it was a very
Right.
highly sort of high touch kind of thing because these clients were really potentially important. And we put them up on a pedestal, made them feel really
Yeah.
important, gave them a platform to share their story and made them the hero again. So podcast is a great way to make someone feel really
Yeah.
unique and special.
That's fantastic. No, I actually remember I heard this guy that I met about 4 years ago, and if I had just taken his advice then, I probably would be a $100 million company right now. But it's taken me a
Yeah.
while to learn this. But he told me how he used to get clients with like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, like all these massive names.
Wow.
And he just said all he did was he just did something that nobody else would do. Is he would always send like a unique personalized gift
Yeah.
directly to their management
Yeah.
that was like actually expensive,
Yeah.
that even if he didn't have a lot of money, he knew they would actually take. So like when he first started out, he bought, I think, Justin Bieber a golden laptop that was like golden plated. So I think it cost like 2 grand, but it wasn't like
Mhm.
pure gold or something like that. I forgot exactly how it went down, but it was something pretty expensive just to stand out, because if somebody sends you that, what's your first reaction going to be? It's going to be like, crap, this is like actually so cool that someone actually did this for me.
So
No
that
matter
is
how big you are,
Yeah,
it's,
no, that's amazing that would work at the Bieber level because we did
yeah,
something very similar at Scorpion. So this thing I've been teasing, the USI, it stands for uniquely striking impression.
ooh,
And the idea is that as a marketing team, we had to hold ourselves accountable. We held ourselves accountable to this standard of anything we would do that in marketing, whether it be content or how we showed up at a booth at a conference, or we did a tremendous amount of gift marketing. And so we would call those USIs because they had to be unique, it had to be something that they'd never seen before. If we
right.
sent them something, it would have to be, something unique. It would have to be striking, which means it would have to give them an emotional reaction, like, whoa, this is interesting. And it has to leave
Yeah.
an impression. And if we did that, then that would help us to sort of stand out in the sort of the sea of agencies that are trying to attract more attorneys as clients. And so I'll give you a couple examples. We probably spent over the years, and these are big numbers because we were a bigger agency, but we probably spent like $2 to $3 million on sending out cookies to law firms.
Wow.
And these are not just sort of crappy, crumbly, dusty little cookies. These are gourmet cookies with amazing packaging and the wrapping and all this stuff. And then we personalized it in some cases. And the reason why we would do that is we know that that the gatekeeper is the person to win over in a law firm. That's their
Right.
job, is to prevent the vendors from bothering the attorney, right? So
Yeah.
we would send them an amazing experience, these cookies, as a way to open the door for the sales team to call. The
Yeah.
unique thing that we did though was we actually sent them before the sales team ever reached out. So it was literally the first touch point they got from Scorpion was
Yes.
a FedEx box with the cookies, and then the salesperson would follow up
Right.
on did they get the cookies, and just kind of begin, like you said, begin that very light touch conversation leading into potentially a sales conversation.
Yeah, and I think, this is kind of why I've reached the realization that like the reason people are billionaires and the reason people are not billionaires, at least if they're trying to be a big
Yeah.
company, is because they just aren't playing the same game. Like they just are not fully understanding all the things that are required to make people say yes to everything. Because it
Yeah.
was like what you're doing is you're creating something where the amount of yeses goes up dramatically. And if you had told me 3 years ago when I was grinding it on outbound calls that there was a way to get 80% more people to say yes to something,
Mhm.
I would have, or even 800% more people, my mind
Yeah.
would have exploded.
Yeah.
I mean, because I wouldn't have understood how am I getting all these
Exactly.
meetings. That's why it's like so crazy to me that so many people don't know how to get leads
Mhm.
online, when in fact it's probably the easiest thing in the world if you just understand like what people are willing to pay for. Like
Yeah.
what things are people, and the thing about cookies is like, everyone loves cookies. There's
Yeah.
no one who dislikes a cookie. Like
Yeah.
everyone loves cookies.
Yeah.
And so everyone is going to find that valuable, and everyone has purchased a cookie before, especially a
Yeah.
good cookie. And if it's really good, they're probably going to like you more just naturally as a human being, you know? Um,
Yeah. The funny
yeah,
thing is because we were verticalized at Scorpion. It was a big part of our success. And what I mean by that is we only had a couple of businesses that we would work with. We decided not to work with a lot of different types of companies, SMBs and whatnot that could potentially want to work with us, but we decided not to because we were really set on building scale in the company. But
right.
a funny thing would happen with the attorneys because we did this often, year after year, quarter after quarter. Wasn't always cookies, but there was buzz in the community. The conferences that the attorneys would go to, they would talk about the Scorpion cookies, right? And it was this great sort of secondary vehicle for us to be sort of in the ethos of their day to day.
Yeah.
That if you don't do those types of things, then you miss the opportunity to really create momentum for your brand.
Right. And that's the key. I mean, I think if more people realize that the real goal is just to get a conversation to happen,
Yeah.
not even just to sell them, but just to get a conversation to happen, they'd make
Mhm.
way more sales. Like it's just that simple, you know? So I love that. I will ask you kind of, because I know we're sort of reaching the end here. I will ask you just in terms of choosing those products, right? I actually just went through this whole process last night with my business partner when I was talking about, this new product we're launching.
Yeah.
And we really spent a lot of time thinking like, okay, if I were to search for, content planning and community building online, are we really 10x better than all the options? Or do we at least see a pathway
Mm.
to that where we can defend it and still maintain our profit margins? Because of some unique system we've created, we can maintain our profit margins and be 10x better at scale with just that. And a lot of times people can't, because in reality, like there are a lot of really good businesses for content planning, and there's a lot of really good business for content planning and community building. But I do see a path based on like examining it. If we add on another adjective, which is B2B SaaS, or even just SaaS and then add B2B,
Mm.
there is a path for us to be 10x better than the best person right now in the market for B2B SaaS community building and content planning. So I'm curious, when you guys picked your products that you would scale, or your
Mm.
niches, which is
Mhm.
technically just a variation of the product, did you think of it the same way, or what was your determining factor that made it so you would pursue a product or a product line?
So the product line was heavily dependent on the evolution of the internet. Like this was back, Scorpion started 22 years ago now, back when websites were very 1.0.
Right.
And the product line expanded as things like SEO came along, and then PPC, and then social media. And so it was really more the interesting part of this, I think, is Scorpion had grown to a certain point when I was arriving on the scene where they had a lot of revenue, but in order for the company to scale, they had to begin to streamline processes and build systems that would support more volume, but at the
Right.
without having to hire at the same clip, right?
Yes.
It's very challenging. Sort of the fundamental challenge with an agency is as you grow, you have human resources that are required to continue to provide the same or better level quality of service. And so the way that we approached that was through software and
Yep.
building internal software. But the way that this all came together was that we had a book of business. We looked at our book of business and we identified that attorneys were by far and away the most profitable business. We had the best relationships with our attorney clients. They were easiest to sell. We had a good brand name, and so we decided to really focus on that for the
Yeah.
immediate term. And then the next market we went after was home services, which are not attorneys. They have different needs and they buy differently, and so on and
Right.
so forth. But the reason why we chose them is because they were small local businesses that have a local focus. In other words, that plumbers only go within a specific radius. Same thing with a
Right.
DUI attorney, right? And so there was some
Yeah.
sort of some need-based similarities. But the other big one, which was there's just a lot of search traffic for plumbers in
Yeah.
HVAC, and the biggest one of the biggest products we sold, frankly, was PPC. And so we had to also figure out, of all the different service models that we wanted to target, which one would drive the most revenue for Scorpion.
100%. And this will be my last question. We can go in the lightning round and then give you a chance to share what you do and how people can work with you. Because I'm really excited about what you offer.
Cool.
I think it's super cool. If anyone doesn't know Scorpion, like, it's a really big company. So definitely some real cred here. But last question would be, I'll kind of give you more of a scenario and see your thoughts on it. So on that note, with the product design and everything, one thing my business partner and I were talking about last night was if we choose e-commerce as the e-commerce content planning and community building, we can get less sort of experienced blog writers because they're writing about stuff that's like more common. It's not like B2B SaaS and everything like that. So they don't need to have as much product knowledge. Whereas B2B SaaS, even though we have a better story and a better community and all this stuff with that, it requires more technical people in the long run. What we ended up deciding was that it would be better for our flywheel because those B2B SaaS companies could help us in a myriad of other ways in the long run because we have a B2B SaaS product, as opposed to e-commerce, which is kind of outside of our flywheel. So I just described that scenario to you because I'm curious, is that like a conversation you're talking about that you guys would have internally, was not just what is best for acquisition, but also what is best for defending margins? Because really that whole situation is about which one can we actually scale talent with and still have a high profit margin and be able to still be the best in that niche and maintain that margin from 1 million to 100 million, right? Is that like a conversation you would have?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other sweetheart sort of space in that Scorpion competed, and we decided not to go into it. But it's a big category in SMB and local, which is automotive. We decided not to go into automotive. That may have changed since I left, but at the time, because the product was so different than our core competency. Our core competency was doing lead gen for attorneys. We shifted to something that was a near sort of parallel to that, which is lead gen for plumbers and HVAC technicians. If we did automobile marketing where you have to have this, it's a different product where you have like feeds of automobiles and prices and all this. It's just a much different beast, and the learning curve would be so great that it would be very expensive for us to figure it out, and there was no guarantee that we would figure it out versus just doing something very similar to attorneys.
That's great. That's great. Great answer. And I want to jump real quick into the lightning round, which we typically ask, just a few rapid fire questions and rapid fire responses. So you said you got started with Scorpion. Now you're not there anymore, but you got started, when was it? 2014 or
2015?
2015. Nice. So was that 7-year run or was that a 6-year run? How long was that?
Yeah. I mean, it was March of 2015 to the end of last year, end of 2021. So 6.5 years. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And is there a business book you'd recommend anybody read?
Well, it's on the top of my mind. So I'll say Building a Story Brand, I think is the name of it.
Great book.
That's one on top of my mind. Obviously, I read a lot of books, so I could probably.
You got a lot of books behind you. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any advice you'd give to your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, just listen to your inner voice and follow it, and don't discount it, and don't put what other people think you should do ahead of what you believe in your heart to do. Follow your heart.
It's great advice. Great advice. Classic advice. And then last question, what would you do? This is more of a theoretical thing, but you've actually seen it happen. So you would actually have a really good answer to this, I feel. But what would you do if you could scale, let's just for sake of argument, scale a $1 million business to $10 million in 12 months? What things would you do to go from 1 to 10 in 12 months?
Well,
specifically an agency.
Yeah. So I would go into my current book of business and I would understand which segment of my business is am I the absolute best in the world at? And I'd uncover that. And then once I uncovered that, I'd go out and just go get a lot more of that business. I'd put a lot of focus and effort behind that specific thing, say no to everything else.
Incredible. This has been a fantastic interview. Definitely one for the books. Thank you, Corey, for being on the show.
Sure,
How
Lucas.
can people work with you? Do they go to CoreyQuinn.com? Is that the best way?
So you can learn more about me and the work I do at CoreyQuinn.com. I also do a daily newsletter. It's 5 days a week, not 7 yet, but 5 days a week, where you get a 1 minute tip on how to grow, scale, build your business without overwhelm. So if you are looking for this type of content that we've been talking today, I'd love for you to join my daily newsletter. You can get there at CoreyQuinn.com/newsletter. And besides that, I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow some of my content there. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, I love connecting with people and having chats like the one we are having right now. So feel free to go to my website, send me an email, and I'd love to connect and see how I can help you.
Fantastic, man. I'm going to subscribe to your newsletter. Actually, how can I do that? What's the link?
It's CoreyQuinn.com/newsletter.
Okay, perfect. And
Yep.
Corey, if anyone's unsure, it's Corey, right?
You got it.
Quinn. Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so go there. I'm going to do that right after this. But everyone who's listening, this has been a fantastic interview. Really kind of drives home the whole rationale behind lead magnets. I love the USI concept. I love the cookies concept. Do stuff like that. It doesn't always need to be things that is directly relevant to your product. I mean, cookies are not relevant to Scorpion's core business, right?
Nope,
So
it's relevant to the recipient.
Exactly. And that's all they care about. It's whatever they find valuable and what they pay for with either time or money. So if you do that, you can scale. Obviously, he did with Scorpion. So thank you, Corey. Really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for being on the show.